on Genesis chapter 41. Verse 1 says, "Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile." Now, this has been 2 full years since the cupbearer was released from jail. And the events here might have occurred on the birthday of Pharaoh once again, because that last time it happened at the birth of Pharaoh, or birthday of Pharaoh. Verses 2 through 4, "And lo, from the Nile there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grass. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and gaunt. And they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke." So he has a dream about cows coming up out of the river. Now, it was common for cows to stand in the river during the heat of the summer. 7 cows came out of the river that were healthy looking, they were fat. And 7 cows followed them out of the river that were skinny and they were ugly. Now, the ugly cows ate up the 7 fine-looking cows. What does sleek mean? Fat.
Oh, okay. Ate the cow?
Yeah. The skinny ones ate the fat ones. It's a dream. Yeah, right. Yes. Verse 5, "And he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. And the thin ear swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream." So Pharaoh had a second dream, apparently that same night. He dreamed that, 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, and the heads of grain, they were plump and they were good. Then 7 heads of grain that were blighted by the east wind sprang up, and they devoured the 7 good heads of grain. Now, this dream, apparently it was very real to Pharaoh. You ever had those dreams that just seem very real? Well, he woke up, realized it was just a dream. Now, keep in mind that these dreams that help shape the events in Joseph's life always occurred in 2s. Remember, originally he had a dream himself, and he had 2 dreams. He had one where these haystacks were bowing down to him, and another one where the sun, moon, and stars were bowing down to him. And that was to signify that his father and his brothers were going to will one day bow down to him. He had those 2 dreams. Why 2 dreams? Why 2? To establish a matter. Yeah. 2 or more witnesses are how a matter is established. It can't be just one witness. Then we had the dream of the cupbearer and the baker. 2 more dreams there, and he interpreted those. Now we have 2 dreams of Pharaoh, and he's going to interpret these. Verse 8. "Now it came about in the morning that his spirit was troubled. So he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh." You see, Pharaoh was really disturbed about these dreams, and apparently Elohim impressed upon his heart that these dreams were very important to him and to his nation. Now, Pharaoh called for all his magicians to give him a satisfactory explanation for these dreams. I don't know what these magicians really were. They're probably yes men, be my guess. What does this mean? It means, "Oh, great Pharaoh, you will live forever, and how the people adore you." Oh, well, that's a good interpretation. But I don't think he put up with that in this case. He knew there was some significance to the nation here in connection with these dreams. Verse 9, "Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. And we had a dream on the same night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream." Okay, now all of a sudden, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. It's been 2 years. Remember when he left prison, what was the request by Joseph? Remember me. Yeah, don't forget me. Well, 2 years went by. Oh, yeah. I remember him now. Now, why does he remember him all of a sudden? Now he can get something out of it. Okay? Yeah, I got your guy. I know just the guy. Verse 12. Now a Hebrew youth was with us there, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard. And we related them to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came about that just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, but he hanged him. So the cupbearer recounts his encounter with the young Hebrew man named Joseph. I'm reading this, and he's talking to Pharaoh, the cupbearer is. And he's talking to him in third person. Now, you know what that means, don't you? I don't either. I was wondering why he did that.
Well, I think that's sort of the way they speak to royalty.
Okay, yeah?
And that might be what they were doing.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Lewis, it's good to have you back. But yeah, he's talking as if he's not there, but yeah, I'll bet that's right, Lewis. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. Now, there are 6 verbs in this verse that indicate these things took place quickly. Joseph, he had to be cleaned up before he could go meet with Pharaoh. Verses 15 and 16. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream, but no one can interpret it. And I've heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. Elohim will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. See, we talked about this before. Who was the only other guy in Scripture who could interpret dreams? Daniel. They both said the same thing. It's Elohim that does it, not us. He gives, Joseph and Daniel both give Elohim all the credit. Verse 17. So Pharaoh spoke to Joseph. In my dream, behold, I was standing on the bank of the Nile. And behold, 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the marsh grass. And lo, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and ugly and gaunt, such as I had never seen for ugliness in all of the land of Egypt. And the lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. Yet when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had devoured them, for they were just as ugly as before. And I awoke. So Pharaoh tells his dream to Joseph. And he says the second set of cows are the ugliest cows he'd ever seen. Verse 22, I saw also in my dream, and behold, 7 ears, full and good, came up on a single stalk. And lo, 7 ears, withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. Then I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. So, he's just recounting everything that happened. The magicians couldn't help him at all. Verse 25, now Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. Elohim has told to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. And the 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 thin ears scorched by the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. For it is as I have spoken to Pharaoh. Elohim has shown it to Pharaoh what he is about to do. So Joseph says these dreams say that Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 fat cows, 7 good heads, there's 7 good years of food, and the 7 skinny, ugly cows and the 7 thin heads are 7 years of famine. Verse 29, behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. So he says the 7 years of lush abundance are going to be forgotten. Those 7 years of drought and famine are going to be so bad. That's why the thin cows didn't get any fatter when they ate the fat cows. It's just, you're going to forget about them. Those 7 years are going to be so bad. Now, Egypt does not depend on rain as much as it depends on the Nile. The Nile overflows annually and floods the land. You see how far inland it goes and floods the land. It leaves rich topsoil. And it's very lush there around the Nile. But boy, you get very far away from it. That's that desert. But the extent of that flooding, it determines how much farmland is going to be fertile. And that's all they have to go by. Verse 32. Now as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by Elohim, and Elohim will quickly bring it about. Well, that's why it's repeated twice, because that is how Elohim establishes a matter. He does it according to his Torah. In Deuteronomy 19, verse 15, a single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he's committed. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed. And this has been explained by Yeshua to apply to all matters. Matthew 18, starting at verse 15, and if your brother sins, go and reprove him in private. If he listens to you, you've won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the assembly. And if he refuses to listen even to the assembly, let him be to you as a Gentile and tax gatherer. So, how could, by 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established? How could you apply that?
Murder.
How?
Well, they're not going to believe just one person, I wouldn't think.
Shouldn't be enough, should it?
Unless he's a cop.
Well, even at that. I mean, I've done jury duty before, and they asked me, it was a rape case, and they asked me, I said, will you be willing to convict on just the testimony of the victim? And I said, and no evidence? Not aside from that? And I said, no, I won't. And I got up thinking I'd get to leave, and they said, he'll do. What? Hey, hang on, did you hear me? I said, no. And sure enough, that's all they had. Not only that, it was an ex-boyfriend. And not only that, the woman married his best friend between the time that he got arrested and it got to trial. And one lady on the jury in the jury room said, can we just put them all in jail? All 3 of them? I don't think they would have allowed that. But no, it was just a mess. I mean, and in Scripture, if you want to establish a matter in Scripture to go by, look for 2 or more witnesses, always in Scripture. Yeah, why is that? Same reason, yeah. A witness is to a contract. Going back to Genesis 41, verses 33 and 34. Now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. Okay, so Joseph gives some unsolicited advice here to Pharaoh. He mentions 3 things. He says, first of all, appoint someone as a national commissioner, and appoint regional overseers. And he said, it also institute urban grain storage. Okay? That's what he says to do. And grain will last a long time if it's kept in dry storage. Verses 35 and 36. Then let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. And let the food become as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish during the famine. So the food will be stockpiled during these 7 plentiful years, and that'll prepare for the future. Verse 37, now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since Elohim has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you." So the whole household of Pharaoh agreed that the advice was good. Joseph was made prime minister, second only to Pharaoh himself. And you notice that same thing happened to Daniel. Second in command over the entire world kingdom. Yeah, and that's centuries later, but same thing. Verse 41. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, "Bow the knee," and he set him over all the land of Egypt. Now Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet ring. Now what's that mean? Do about anything. It's a done deal. That's right. Well, he can make law. He's in charge of making law with having that signet ring. That's pretty powerful. And he can buy and sell land and anything else in the kingdom. He has full autocratic authority over everybody except Pharaoh and his family.
Did you say he's second in charge?
Yeah, he's second in charge. And, I mean, with that kind of a company credit card, he's very powerful. Verse 44. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphanath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh gave him absolute power. Yeah, Cliff?
What's the nationality of the wife?
Egyptian.
So she's,
Well, he's probably the only Hebrew in there. And maybe other slaves, but I don't know. Didn't seem like a wise move. You know, Egypt, though, is in a different classification than the Hittites, the Girgashites, and those from the land of Canaan. Egypt is not in the land of Canaan. Now,
the land that they were going to possess.
right. And Egyptians were to be treated differently because, if you'll recall, he said, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So, and I don't know, it doesn't seem like a wise move for him to, but I think if the Pharaoh says marry her.
Will you say no to the Pharaoh?
Yeah, you say no to the Pharaoh? Yeah. No, I'm sure she was good looking, Tom, yeah. He looked at her and said, "Oh, okay, I guess, yeah.
Michael said just once. Will you say no to Pharaoh?
Yeah, I just said no to Pharaoh one time. That's right. It don't happen again. That's correct. Zaphanath-Paneah, which in Coptic signifies a revealer of secrets. Okay, that's what he named him. Or the man in whom secrets are revealed. That's what that means. Verse 47. And during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and placed the food in the cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up grain in abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. The years of plenty were so plenty, the abundance from the land couldn't even be measured.
This is just 20%.
Yeah, that's just 20%, right? Right. Verses 50 and 51. Now before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, bore to him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, Elohim has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. Manasseh means one who causes to forget. And he's talking about his trials that he had in Egypt and the way his brothers were so evil to him. Verse 52, and he named the second Ephraim, for he said, Elohim has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Guess what Ephraim means? Fruitful. Very good. Got some Sharpies out there today. Verse 53, when the 7 years of plenty which had been in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to the Egyptians, go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, you shall do. Boy, see, Pharaoh's a wise individual. We see here Joseph is a picture of Messiah. Pharaoh, he says, tells the people of Joseph, whatever he says to you, you do. Okay? You know, that reminds me of what Mary said to the servants about her son. That was back in John chapter 2, starting at verse 3. When the wine gave out, the mother of Yeshua said to him, they have no wine. And Yeshua said to her, woman, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. And they did. How many jugs of wine did he make? 7? You know how big those jugs were? Yeah. They held each one about, if I'm not mistaken, the size of those jugs, 150 gallons. Now that's party. Yeah, well, no, this was after they ran out. That's what he did. Verse 56, when the famine was spread over all the face of the earth, then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. And the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the earth. Elohim used Joseph in a mighty way. So the famine's everywhere. Now, if people want to eat, what are they going to have to do? People in the world want to eat. What are they going to have to do? Go see Joseph. That's right. And buy it from him. Wonder what price you can put on food when that's the case. What do you got? That's right. What do you got? Okay, let's... anything else on Genesis 41?